Welcome to episode 38 of What Happens Next, the podcast dedicated to helping you think about the next stages of your life, particularly if you're in your mid-50s to mid-60s and thinking about what conventionally used to be called retirement and what that might include. My name's Chris Ames. I'm a chartered financial planner, and my role as your host is to introduce you to people who might give you insights into the next stages of your life. And it's a real privilege to interview people who can provide insight. It's one of the benefits of having a podcast, actually, because I love the fact that I can just phone people up and say, I'd love for you to share your expertise. And having a platform to do that allows me to do that without it being too weird. I'd love to know, we're now in week 38 of the podcast, and if you've been listening regularly to the interviews we share, I'd love to know what you think. So feel free to email me at hello@whathappensnext.life. Share what you're learning from the podcast. Share the elements that you're really enjoying. Share what we can improve on, because we'd love to know your thoughts. Today, we've got an interview with Ruth Sturkey. Now, Ruth is a fellow chartered financial planner, co-founded her financial planning business, but recently sold her business. So is going through her own What Happens Next moment. In this interview, we talk about the importance of financial well-being over and above simply just having more money. We talk about what financial planners should do when they're thinking about your life as opposed to your money. We talk about the 5 pillars of well-being that Ruth thinks about when she's thinking about her What Happens Next. Ruth sees financial well-being as a foundation. It's interesting, this particular point, because I think we are all guilty of following our own perspectives on this, because I probably agree with Ruth. I think knowing you've got enough is really important, but we've interviewed people where they've said physical well-being is important, and that's the foundation. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to this question, by the way, but I think Ruth's perspective is really insightful. We talk about the benefits throughout both our lives and careers of having people skills, and actually how being a coach and having a coach gives us the opportunity to ask deeper, sometimes uncomfortable questions to really help people. Interestingly, Ruth shares a lot of the challenges that we know our clients face when on the approach to the handover of her business. Her head was, in her words, full to the brim, and it felt like a real busy time when it got to the stage where she actually had to exit, and then she was in a situation where she was saying, right, now what do I do? And that led to Ruth opening and starting her brilliant blog, 1000 Weeks, I'd recommend you check out. Without further ado, let's move on to the interview. As I say always on What Happens Next, and I know it's not always convenient, because I know that I listen to my podcast while I'm riding my bike. So trying to grab a pad and a pen while I'm trying to do that is probably not a wise move. But if you are sitting down and listening to this and you want to get the most out of it, take some notes and highlight the elements that you're going to use to incrementally improve your life today. Let's move on to the interview with Ruth. Good morning and welcome to, well, that was a bit high. Good morning and welcome to this episode of What Happens Next, the show that talks about some of the challenges that we might face when we're trying to navigate that next chapter of our lives. Now, you'll know if you follow the What Happens Next channel that I'm not keen on the phrase retirement, and we'll talk a little bit about that today. But what I want to do is have conversations with interesting people who can provide insight into that next chapter of your life just by really being curious and asking loads of questions. And I'm absolutely excited. I don't want to over egg the pudding today, Ruth, but I'm absolutely excited that Ruth has chosen to join me today to have that conversation. Ruth, how are you?
Hello, Chris. I'm really good. Thank you very much. I haven't seen you for in real life. I think since
Concert
that
that the
Rock
band, wasn't it?
Ukraine, was it the Rock Ukraine event we
It
went to,
was.
which was
And you
a
know what? That was
huge.
it. I mean, I was out over the weekend with cats actually, and my dancing hasn't improved in the like sort of 25 years that I've liked to like. I've loved to dance, but I still enjoy it.
I
I
love it.
s-
It's one of my favourite
absolutely
things.
love it. Yeah. What's your taste in music? What do you love?
Well, it's pretty eclectic, to be quite honest. So, talking of dancing, I on Good Friday afternoon, a bunch of friends said they were going to go to Fat Tony's Fat Fest,
Oh,
which is basically, I don't know, I didn't really know Fat Tony, but he was a big DJ in the 80s who, clubbed with Boy George and one thing and another. Practically died from drugs and alcohol, got himself clean 10 or so years ago. And so now he does the circuit doing afternoon dance clubs, right? So this was from 12 midday till 8 p.m. And you just kind of rock up, you can have some drinks and stuff. And he's just playing great, not all cheesy, but mostly cheesy kind of 80s, 90s
nothing wrong with
dance
that.
music. It was blooming brilliant. It was such a
Yeah.
lot of fun.
I've got so the place we went. We will talk about what happens next in a minute. But as we were on music, the place we went on Saturday, my mate Andy Fano, um, is an amazing guy. So he does his day job is he's a fundraiser for the hospice. We raise a lot of money for, but he is a soul DJ. So it's all 70s and 80s soul,
Oh,
and
brilliant.
it's so many brilliant tunes, and like
Yeah.
literally the dance floor is full all night. But yeah, absolutely love it. We could talk about music all day, but let's talk about why we're here.
Let's.
Um, I know who you are, and I know why this is going to be such a great conversation. But for the benefit of our audience, tell us a bit about you.
Thanks, Chris. Well, I guess kind of how we met is because we're both at our core financial planners, aren't we, Chris?
Yeah,
This is the kind of shortened version of my journey, but this is probably the more relevant bit that I was. And still am actually a chartered financial planner. And in 2007, along with two great colleagues of mine, we set up a financial planning business called the Red House. Um, and I kind of describe it as my kind of beautiful little boutique business. We were at our biggest, probably 7 or 8 people. I should remember that, but I don't quite. And we just had a lovely time advising and working with our clients to really hopefully help them have good outcomes at this kind of point that we're talking about, Chris. This
yeah,
this
yeah,
thing that some people would call retirement, and we both hate that word. And by doing that, it means you kind of become very technically qualified. You get used to kind of running a business, which was lots of fun. Build a team, and I loved all of that. And then in 2017, my business partner had to retire early due to ill health, and me and my other business partner, Linda, took the business forward. And in 2017, we were both probably early 50s at that point. And we decided that we'd taken the business as far as we could, and we wanted to find a good business to merge our practice into, which we did at the end of 2017. Went through a 3-year handover, and which ended in December 20, kind of COVID back end ish.
yeah.
And I've spent the last 3 years being a non-executive director with the firm I merged my business into, who are called Paradigm Norton, a great financial planning firm. And I've also been experimenting, I guess, with various other different things because shock horror, me, who spent years talking to clients about accumulating wealth for a future event, find myself at this
There.
place, there, Chris, there,
Yeah.
and think, bloody hell, we as financial planners mostly miss out on the really important conversations that we should be having with our clients to prepare them better for
Yeah.
this stage of life. So I'm kind of going through this. Obviously, this is a weird expression, lived experience of tiptoeing into this stage of life, shall we call it? And I'm just trying to work my way through it, really. So I guess that's a little bit about me, Chris.
Yeah.
I'm also not dancing.
Well, I mean, dancing's part of the experiment, I'd imagine,
Part of
Ruth.
the
You know,
experiment.
we've got to
It's been a
include a bit
lifelong
of
one.
dance. Yeah. But it's interesting. Would it, so here's the interesting thing about that. So I want to explore a couple of elements on that. But I suppose the first element would be knowing what you know now about how this transition is often quite challenging
Mm.
in ways of beyond the money. What would you do differently as a financial planner?
So after I stepped away from my kind of day job, so 2020, maybe even 2021, I can't quite remember the timing now, I was approached by an organization called the Institute for Financial Wellbeing, who I know you know, Chris, and I think Chris Budd, who
Yeah,
was the founder, has been one of your guests. And at first I thought, financial well-being? What's well-being got to do with what we do? But I listened and I read around the subject, and all of a sudden I had this great big kind of penny drop moment when I realized that actually what we do is in terms of helping people with money is really, really important. But what's the context, and what context are we enabling our clients to see money within? So,
yeah,
and again, whether you've done this, Chris, but typically when I used to meet a new client, I would obviously welcome them in, go through the chit chat, and then I would say, what's important to you about money? And immediately you start to have a money conversation, don't you, with a client? And there were some stock answers that always come up, which we can touch on if necessary. But the question I should have been asking is, what's important to you about life? Because life is this thing that we're all getting through. And when you think about money in the context of well-being, you start to have much more expansive conversations. Now, the
yeah,
framework
yeah,
that actually Chris Budd introduced me to um, was one that came through for some research by Rath and Harper, which identifies 5 pillars of well-being. And in fact, I think you talk about this, Chris, on your What Happens Next website. But just for the purpose of this conversation, all of us within need a balance between career/purpose,
yeah,
social relationships, whether that's family or friends, feeling and being part of a community, having physical well-being and financial well-being. So
yeah,
if we as financial planners who have incredible access to our clients, because they tend to come and see us at least once a year, and they share with us all sorts of things about what's going on with their lives. And don't get me wrong, I did have wide conversations with clients, but it was more. I think we could be much more intentional about asking our clients to think about those 5 pillars, those 5 pockets of life, and ask them how they're feeling about each of them. Because I've seen plenty of people who've got tons of money, but rubbish relationships. Their marriages fall into pieces, their health
yeah,
is
yeah.
rubbish, and they don't know what to do once they stop working that thing that has created the wealth. So,
So it's really interesting, Ruth, because I think my penny drop moment was in a meeting where we had a conversation with a client who we knew, based on all the plans that we'd put in place, was never going to run out again. Like
ooh,
based on the assumptions we'd
job done.
used, and job done. So I'm going,
You
great.
could argue, yeah.
Here's how I'm going to let Mike know that he can be